So early on, we started this series, and a couple weeks ago, Sarah was talking about the power of privilege, and she was speaking into the fact that it is not wrong to have privilege, but it is wrong if we use that privilege to oppress, or we're complacent, are not using it for expanding God's kingdom, God's justice, right? And then Drew talked to us about last week the power of lament and how important it is to empathize with those around us. And now today we're going to talk about the power of praying, or the power of prayer. And these verses, displayed here they're so, I think, inspiring in many ways, and how the order of things are really here. So we're going to get into that today, and I'm super, super excited about that. So, so we're gonna talk about three things that I found in this passage, and the first one. Oh, by the way, as you might know, Brenda, we've been using her book, Becoming Brave, and her name is Brenda Salter McNeil. So I'm gonna be just pretty much gleaning from her knowledge and the things that he has to speak about Esther. And I'm going to be having some of the quotes here. So it was really, really good, very inspiring. So anyhow, if we go back on Esther, and one of the first things that I found here as we were reading is there is a call to go out of your comfort zone. So number one, a call to go out of your comfort zone. And that is obviously, Drew was talking about how she was on the palace, and then she was not willing to just stay on the palace, on the bubble, on actually what she already had, like the privilege and the comfort. But she decided to empathize with those that were suffering, and she was very much worried about her cousin Mordecai, who was like a father to her. Um, and she actually went out of her ways to find out what's happening, right? So she actually did not allow being on such a powerful, like basically what a woman on that time, she had male servants, female servants, attendants, and she was a queen, of a very, very big empire at the time. So she did not allow that to be an impediment for her to actually go out of her ways to feel the discomfort and of the majority of people around her. So one of the quotes here that Brenda talks about going out of her comfort zone, he says, assimilating may work when it's about your own comfort and well-being, but when you realize that other people's lives are at stake, you cannot be concerned only with your own personal safety or professional advancement. You have to step out. And Brenda talks about how actually Mordecai, at the beginning, he was telling Esther to not reveal her identity as a Jew, because he knew that in order to survive in an empire that was oppressing them, that was racist, towards other ethnicities, that she needed to hide that in order to survive in such an environment. And that happens a lot in minority cultures here in the US and beyond. Sometimes we even have to hide certain identities that we were born with in order to actually assimilate to the majority culture. In this case, in the US, that's what's called whiteness, or like Western mentality, and but basically Mordecai, because he was so concerned for Esther, she was like, okay, you gotta just like, don't say you're a Jew, just go, and so you can survive. But now things change, like Brenda was saying here, like now people's lives are at stake, people are going to die. So it's no longer about her own safety, but it is about the safety of other people. She has the power that none of the other Jews had. Mordecai didn't have the power. No one else had the power to persuade the king not to kill the Jews at the time. So basically, what's happening here is that she needs to make a choice. Or I either stay on my comfort zone, sort of ignore what's happening out there so that I can survive for myself, or otherwise I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, find out what's happening so that I can do something about it. Now, another quote that Brenda actually writes here on her book, it's not here on the PowerPoint, but it says, Mordecai's call for Esther to be informed is also a call to us. Understanding current sociopolitical issues and using this information to inform our actions is crucial to being actively involved in the work of justice and reconciliation. So in order to be empowered as advocates for social change and racial justice, we must be informed about what is really happening in the world around us. So basically, there is this thing that we need to be aware. We need, in order, awareness can only come from allowing ourselves to be informed. In order for us to actually take action, we need to allow ourselves to get out of our comfort zone and be informed of what's happening outside of us. If we are going on our everyday life without allowing ourselves to be aware of what's happening in the US, but also around the world and the injustices that are happening, then change is not gonna come. So we see here she gets out of her comfort zone, right? And the reality is that she does not allow the culture of her time to influence her decisions of staying on the Bible or not. For example, here, let's take it to our times now. Like we have here on the US, the American dream, individualism, consumerism, materialism, nationalism, and all the other isms that you can find. And believe it or not, unconsciously, even if you come from another country, these things actually permeate our daily lives. This culture, this Babylon, how the Bible calls it, actually influences, and we have to actively and intentionally go against those so that we can go out of our comfort zone. It is very hard to do that in the US. Maybe if you live in a developing country, it's much easier. But if you live in a country like here, if you live in NYC, guess what? You are part of the minority of people that have privilege. You know, no matter what ethnicity you come from, just by the fact that you live in NYC, you already have privilege compared to the global South, you know? So there is that sense, okay, now I gotta be intentional to be called out of my comfort zone. And Esther is a great example of that, right? So the question will be, how am I getting out of my comfort zone in my everyday life so that I can relate to others, so that I can feel and empathize, which means that I actually feel what others feel with those that are suffering. In this case, Esther does that with Mordecai and intentionally finds out what is happening that is distressing him. All right, so first we got a call to out of our comfort zone. Second, we have a call to sacrifice. And now let me quote Brenda here again. She could be killed for approaching the king without being summoned. Again, quoting here, she could be killed for approaching the king without being summoned. Of course she's scared. She stands to lose everything, all the power, prestige, and privilege that she had become accustomed to could possibly be gone in the blink of an eye. But he knows, that's Mordecai, that she must speak out because there are other people, an entire nation, whose lives are on the line. How could he encourage her to keep silent when there are so many more people's lives involved? Unquote. So what I love about this passage is that the Bible does not leave out our humanity. Feeling afraid is not wrong. Feeling anxious is not wrong. It is part of being human. Now, if we allow those feelings to actually dictate what we do, then that's a problem. But here we have, Esther. She's not like right away, like, okay, she hears from Mordecai that everyone's gonna die, and she just puts her cape and she's a super heroine and she's gonna go and do it. That does not happen. She actually is like, OMG, like I'm not gonna do that. Like I'm gonna like literally die. And actually I haven't been summoned for 30 days. And this law, Mordecai, that if I go and he does not leave it, his scepter, then I'm gonna die. So she was not at first willing to go. He actually was like, okay, you know what? This is what's happening, Mordecai. I don't know if this is a good idea for me to go and do this. And of course she's afraid. Of course, it's just human to be afraid. So it's like, the problem is, like I was talking with Andrea yesterday, she was telling me, like, the problem is when we allow this fear to bring us back to our comfort zone. So then we feel fear when we're getting out of our comfort zone, and then that fear takes over, and then you step back. I'm about to go somewhere. Oh, but what if I get, infected? What if I die? What if someone robs me if I go to that place? Backed up. What if my children? What if my this? What if my money? What if I lose my job? What if I, don't make it? What if I choose this other job, then I might lose money, And I love how Brenda talks about professional advancement. That is so New York City. That is so city. If you live in another city in the US, like professional advancement, I can give everything but that, That's the only thing that I don't want to give up in order to empathize for others. Not that you are not that means that you're going to leave it all out, but it simply means, are you willing to? If you're asked for, if it requires of it, like it did for Esther, right? So this is a call of sacrifice, and it's okay to feel afraid. But now, as getting out of it will come with anxiety and fear. So what happens here? She is willing to sacrifice everything she has had, her wealth, her financial security, and even in this case, her own life, because guess what? Mordecai tell her, hey, you know what? Like, you might actually die yourself because you're a Jew, and either if you go or not, God's gonna make it. God's gonna make a way. So she's like, okay, I got it. I need to do this. She does not back up. She is fearful, like all of us will be afraid, like all of us will be, but she does not allow the fear to bring her back to her comfort zone. So Mordecai gets back, as we see in the passage, to her and says, like, no, like you gotta do this. And if not, we all die, including you, by the way, because you are a Jew. Don't forget you're a Jew. Don't forget you are not a Persian. You're not a Persian, you're not from Susa, right? You are not. You're a Jew, so you yourself die. And she's tied to that identity of being a Jew at that time, before Jesus came. So you have that, and even if she survives, if all the Jews dies, who is she gonna be? She just have her life and her wealth, but not her identity. If everyone dies but her. So anyhow, she's called to sacrifice. And you know what? You probably won't be called to give out your life. Maybe some of us will, but probably most not, But in this case, she's not only giving her wealth, she's not only giving up her status as a queen, she's giving up her life. She can die, everything, just go like this, But in our case, it's not like that far, of an ask. So the question is, what is God might be asking me to let go of, right? In her case was everything: her wealth, her life, her her status, her professional advancement. But what is God asking us in this season to let go of, to sacrifice? Right? So now that brings us to our last point. So first we talked about the call to go out of your comfort zone. So what is God asking me to let go? What is God asking me? In what ways is God asking me to get out of my comfort zone, right? What is that first step that I need to do in order for me to be informed of the sufferings of others? Just being informed. You don't know what to sacrifice if you don't know who are you sacrificing for. So it is very important before you go and sacrifice to know why are you sacrificing. We are not called to sacrifice for everyone and everything. We all have a specific call to a specific thing and specific people, a specific calling. So it's not like we're going to do everything for everyone, but there is always something. In my case, God called my wife and I to plan an international and inter-ethnic church, right? So that's that's who we think God is calling us to. And there are sacrifices that have to be made. But in your case, what is it? Doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a pastor. What will that be? So a call to go out of your comfort zone, then a call to sacrifice. What is that I need to let go of? And finally, and this is the best of all, you might be asking, Piero, how am I going to do that? How am I supposed to sacrifice? I'm supposed to let go of this comfort. My laptop, it's so nice. My phone, my iPhone, this salary, and I have to feed my kids, like how am I supposed, well, the reality is like we cannot do it on our own strength. Now, without the third point, you cannot do point 1 and 2. Let me repeat that. Without point 3, you cannot do point 1 and 2. And what is that? A call to prayer and fast. It's hard to let go of your comfort zone and to sacrifice if you are not having a relationship with God, a conversation with God. Brenda talks about that Esther's spiritual formation informed her action. It's not that she just prayed for the first time. She have already had a relationship with God in which she was already praying that allowed her to make those decisions to let go of her comfort zone and to do the sacrifice that she needs to make. And guess what? When Mordecai goes and tells Esther for the second time, do you think she went into plan mode and game plan? Okay, let's go. Bring the shard and we're gonna do this and New York style. Come on, let's do this fast like this. She did not go game plan mode. She did not go, let's gather all the team, the board, and let's start thinking about how we're going to help these people, how we're going to do this for God. She did not do that. Her first reaction was, we ought to pray. Not only pray, but fast, which means denying the very things that feed us like food in order for us to be with the Lord, in order for us to have time. Actually, when you fast, you have a lot of time. Why? Because you don't have to prepare the food. You don't have to eat lunch. So you have a lot of time to be with God because you are not eating, right? So it's this call of making time for God, to hear him out. So that's a call to pray and fast. And I love this quote from Brenda. I mean, when we read it with my wife, we were like mind blown, like, oh my gosh, this is like drop mic right there. So it says, quoting here, she instructs Mordecai to spread the word to all the Jews in Susa to fast and pray for 3 days while she and her attendants do the same. Her first impulse is to acknowledge and seek God, and she calls on her community to do likewise. This is absolutely instructive for us. Speaking out against injustice and standing up for righteousness begins with an understanding that we cannot simply rely on our own strength or human understanding. I'm going to repeat that. Speaking out against injustice and standing up for righteousness begins with an understanding that we cannot simply rely on our own strength or human understanding. Esther immediately knows that she cannot just come up with a game plan. She cannot just call a meeting of leaders and strategists and figure things out on her own New York style right there, right? She knows that something more is needed. Esther does not wonder what to do next. She's like, okay, let's do it. No, she's like, her spiritual formation, quoting here, informs her actions. She knows she needs to seek the face of the holy and righteous sovereign God, and that's exactly what she sets out to do, unquote. And I love the quote there, like, her spiritual formation informs her actions. Now, prayer on the Hebrew, it's on the reflective state. Now, there's Hebrew, it's a Semitic language. It has a lot of nuances, very different from English writing. But one of the things about Hebrew is that there is roots on the verbs, and there's different types of roots. One of them is called the reflective verb. A reflective verb is something that bounces back. So for example, if I punch and I put a reflective verb into a punch, that punch becomes a fight because now it's two people punching each other. So if I have the word punch and put a reflective verb on punch, then it will become fight. You know, you cannot do that in English. You can do that in Hebrew. So prayer, it's on a natural reflective verb, which means that it's not a punch, it's a fight, which means it's not me talking to God, it's me talking to God, God talking to me talking to God, God talking to me. There is an actual conversation happening on prayer, on the natural Hebrew language. So we are expecting a conversation. So God gave the strategy to Esther. And you're going to see next week, maybe with Drew, when he preaches, I believe, that going to go into how you can see that Esther did not go and be like, oh, please forgive our people. Like right away, she did not go crazy. She got a strategy. She didn't tell him right away. She didn't tell him, you know, on the first party that she made for them. She didn't tell her on the second. She waited because she had a strategy. More on that next week. But she did not go crazy. She actually masticated and like allow that prayer time and fasting to inform her actions, right? All right, so those are the 3 points. Now we're going and conclude the message. So remember, a call to get out of your comfort zone, a call to sacrifice, and a call to pray and fast. Now, we cannot do that on our own strength. There was a greater one. Maybe you're here and you don't know Jesus. Maybe this is the first time you hear about Jesus. Maybe you know about God, but you don't want to know much more about God, but you want to know about this guy, Jesus, and who he is. And that's what we're all about here at church. And let me tell you, we cannot do those 3. But there was one that did it so that we can do it through him. And guess what? Jesus, there was a greater one. Jesus, guess what? He was called out of his comfort zone like Esther. He came out of his throne room, came to the world, became the lowest of criminals, died on the cross for you and me. He was called out of heaven, even wealthier than Queen Esther. What is more powerful and wealthier and majestic than God himself? To get out of his comfort zone and come to the world and live among us, not among kings, but among the margins and the poor. He came out of his comfort zone. He also was called to sacrifice. He sacrificed to the point of death. Actually, Esther did not die. Her life was spared, but Jesus himself died and she suffered. Why? Because you and I, in our hearts, no matter who we are, we have evil thoughts. And that's the reason why there are injustices of the world, because of humanity, because of our own hearts. If we really look closer, we are the ones committing injustices with our thoughts, not maybe with our actions, but with our thoughts. And we know it's there. Resentment, racism, classism, and desiring things that we shouldn't, and lying, all that stuff. Those are injustices. We commit them against God, against others, against ourselves. But Jesus came to pay the price that we should have paid for what we've done and who we are, so that we no longer have to. He sacrificed. And guess what? He found out God's will through prayer and fasting. Even before he started his ministry, he prayed and fasted for 40 days, not even 3 days, 40 days and 40 nights, so that he can know the will of the Father, to sacrifice. And he got the strategy, just like Esther did, to give it all for humanity once and for all. So if that's you, you just need to pray with me. God, I give it all to you. My heart belongs to you, and forgive me for what I've done, but come into my life and fill me with your Spirit. And if you just say that with your heart and you really mean it, he'll come and encounter you. But if that's not you, but you're like, here, I know Jesus, I know this gospel thing, you know, I know that stuff, but it's just hard to get out of my comfort zone. It's just hard to sacrifice. And it's even hard at times to pray. Forget about fasting. You know, and some of us are just running in life like crazy, carrying our families in our shoulders, you know, with joy, you know, trying to make our jobs and trying to like work in our profession with our own strength, with our own, you know, wisdom and knowledge, without giving full access to God to those areas in prayer. We're just running in life without really giving full access to God like Esther did. You know? And if that's you, I want you to do this little exercise with me and we'll be done. Try this. All right. Breathe out all the air in your lungs. And I'm looking at you because I can see you. So just breathe out. Just breathe out with me. All the air that you can. Now, second point. Now that you've breathed out, you breathe out all the air, no more air, you breathe it out. Yeah, now without breathing new air, breathe out again. Raise your hand if you can do that, because I can't. 3. So it's not possible. God has created you with the capacity to breathe out only after you breathe in. Do you sense the spiritual analogy there? We need to breathe out in order to breathe in. So breathing in is to spiritual formation as breathing out is to mission. We breathe in the Spirit of God, we breathe out the mission of God. This is not my writing. I found it. There is no source for it. No one says that you wrote it, but that's not from me, but I thought it was so good. In one of my trainings, I actually saw this and I wanted to share it. And in order to breathe out the mission of God, you need to breathe in the Spirit of God. And that is only in the place of prayer and conversation with Him. And the mission of God is going forth and doing God's justice into the places that He's called you and called me and called us together.